Hi everyone, my name is Kristy Coromandel and welcome to my Getting Started with Card Making series. I am super excited that you're able to join me in this series. This series is designed specifically for the beginner stamper and also anyone who's wanting to get started with card making and they're just not quite sure how to do it. I get asked a lot of questions about getting started, so I thought I'd put this series together to help answer those questions and resolve any paper crafting concerns that people may have about getting started. Now, a lot of people believe that you need a lot of supplies, a lot of money, and a lot of space to be able to fund a hobby like this. Well, I'm here to tell you that is all a myth. You don't need a lot of supplies or money or space in that fact, and I'm going to show you how we can do that with minimal supplies and limited knowledge and going through the card making process itself. So how's this series going to work? Well, we're going to break every episode down into one aspect of the card making series, starting with our supplies. And each episode will also consist of a challenge for you to help strengthen those creative muscles of yours. And so after each episode, as you do the challenges and participate in the series here, you'll be able to build on that knowledge and that experience through those challenges that we set to be able to learn and to create projects on your own without having the assistance of someone else or even self-doubting yourself about your creative ability. So this week's episode, we are going to talk about our supplies. Now, the myth's always been that you need a lot of supplies to get started, and obviously to get started, there's a lot of outlay in doing so. Well, I'm here to tell you actually don't need a lot of supplies, and there are 6 things. There are 6 items that I recommend that you have in your crafting toolbox. And then there are 2 what I like to call nice to have. So they're not necessarily a must or a need, it's more of a want or a desire. Let's get started and I'll show you what supplies I recommend that you need in your crafting toolbox today. So this week we're going to be talking about our supplies. What are the key essential supplies that you need to begin card making? What don't you need? What are some of the nice to haves? And we'll go through and I'll explain a little bit about each one and as to why I recommend that you start with these tools. So the first one we need is a paper trimmer. Now we all need a paper trimmer, and a paper trimmer may vary depend where you may purchase one from. So what I recommend when you are looking for a paper trimmer is a couple of key things. So one thing you really want to look for, and they come in all different sizes and shapes, and I do have quite a few, but this is my favorite one so far, and I will tell you why as well. It's because across the top here, as you can see, this measures up to just a little over 6 inches. Now, standard card size in Australia, we use A4 cardstock, and a half of that is actually just 5 7/8 of an inch. So you definitely want a 6 inch, so you're not having to put out the extender arm, because honestly, I'm quite lazy to be honest. So you don't want to have to pull out the extender arm all the time. So I like to have my extended arm closed, and then I can do multiple cutting and scoring just using my 6 inch mark. Now the beauty of this particular trimmer is that down the bottom I also have a ruler down here as well, and this one measures in both centimeters and inches, making it a lot easier for me depending on which way I choose to cut my cardstock. Now I do personally work in inches. I find that easier. Same with quilting, in sewing, I work with inches. So it is entirely up to you whether you use centimeters or inches. Now the other thing that's really great here is that this here does stretch out to 17¼ inches in length, or 43½ centimeters. So when I have a big 12 by 12 inch of pattern paper or cardstock, I can definitely cut that down. The other beauty I have here is that I have both a cutting and a scoring blade. Now that's something definitely you want to look for. Some trimmers, this one is pretty unique that you can actually fit both the cutting and the scoring blade in the track as well, and you can just use which one. but most of the time you'll be able to buy the scoring blade separately, and then you'll just have to go and insert that and score. So you definitely do want a cutting and a scoring blade on your trimmer. The other thing that I really like with this particular trimmer is that on the side here I have this 1 1/4 inch mark. So if I want to cut small strips of paper, I can easily do that by moving my cardstock over to here, and then I can cut that down. So that's number 1 essential item that you definitely need. Now number 2 is some white cardstock. Now this is the basis, this is what you're going to be creating a lot with. You're going to be using this pretty much for all of your projects. It's going to be your starting base for a lot of projects that you're doing. So I've got here Stampin' Up's Whisper White cardstock. I've just got the normal white because we can add color to this. We can do all sorts of things with our white cardstock. So I do highly recommend white cardstock, and something that is really good quality. One that's not going to tear easily, one that's thick enough, one that you can do multiple different things with it. So white cardstock. So the next item that you're going to need, believe it or not, is a ruler. And along with a ruler, you are going to want a pencil, and mine does have an eraser at the end, but if you don't have one, then you will need some sort of eraser as well. Now you're going to use a ruler a lot in your paper crafting, whether you're going to be drawing a faint line to line something up, or whether you're going to measure because you want to create an insert or even an envelope for your card. You need a ruler to be able to measure what your card size is, so then you know what size what size envelope that you need to create. Now I have a ruler here that has both inches and centimeters on it. I do switch between the two depending on the project that I'm working with. However, I do prefer to use the inches, but as inches aren't very familiar here in the South Pacific, I am just going to share with you how to actually read the ruler. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. So what we have here is we have our inch mark. So from 2 to 3 is 1 inch. In the center, I've got this long line here. This is our 1/2 inch mark. Then on the either side, you see another long one. These are our 1/4 inches. So 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4, and our 3 inch mark. So our next size, we've got these little ones here, are our 1/8 of an inch mark. So you'll find, go 2 1/8 of an inch. Then our next 1/8 of an inch is 1/4. Then you've got 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch. And you'll hear me using these 3, 5, and 7/8 of an inch. Sorry, let me say that again. These 1, 3, 5, and 7/8 of an inch. Often when I do my projects, you will hear me say 7/8 of an inch is probably a real common one that I use, and my 1/8 of an inch is another common one that I use when I cut. Then below those, we also have our 1/16 of an inch. So you'll find here we've got 2 1/16 of an inch, 2 2/16 of an inch, also known as 2 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch, 4/16 of an inch, also known as our 1/4 mark, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16 is our 1/2 inch mark, and so on. So I don't use those 16-inch markings very often, but sometimes I might want to cut my matting that's very, very thin, and so I may do that, but the majority of the time I am using 1/8 of an inch. So you can use a regular ruler, but I also do have a steel ruler here as well that has inches on it, and it has my centimeters mark on it, and I use this as well. So it depends on what sort of ruler you prefer to use, whatever works for you. So there's our ruler, our pencil with our eraser on the end, and also a rubber. So the next thing that you're going to need is adhesive, okay? There are different types of adhesives on the market. These are probably the most two common ones that I would recommend. So we've either got our snail adhesive, so you just choose one. You don't need both at the moment, so just start with one. So these are my two favorites, so just choose which one that works for you. A snail adhesive is just like a tape runner, so as you go down, you'll see the adhesive come out, and then you'll be able to stick your project on that. So there it is right there. Now the other one that I like to use is our liquid glue here. Now I particularly like this one because it has a small tip at the top, which is great for those fine details that you want to stick down because it's liquid. So it comes out really nice and fine. And then if you want to do big areas, it has this big section right here. So you can do a whole card base and stick that down. So my preferred method is liquid glue for two reasons. One, it can do everything. It can get into small areas. With this one here, you can't always get the small areas. The other thing I like about it is because it does start off wet before it dries, and it does dry clear, that when I'm trying to get something in its place, I've got some jiggle time room to try and get it in the right spot before I'm like, yep, I'm happy with it. Whereas I've used this one to stick something down, yeah, well, it's pretty much stuck down. There's not much more you can do about it. So I do definitely prefer this. So you do need some sort of adhesive. You don't need both, you just need one. So just pick which one is going to work best with you. Now the last thing that you're going to need is a pair of scissors. Now I do recommend that you get a pair of scissors that does come to a point at the end. Yes, a pair of kitchen scissors may do the trick in the interim, but I really do recommend this, is that you want to invest in some tools that are going to last the longest, that you're going to have all the time, that are going to meet the needs of your new hobby. So the reason why you really want these ones in particular is I can cut right to the point, and it goes straight to that point. It doesn't stop halfway up like some kitchen scissors would. This goes right to the point. This is also good for when you're trying to cut things out with great detail. Now, obviously when we're starting out, you may not be able to afford or to invest in punches or into dies, because you know we have a die cutting machine, etc. You can do a lot of cutting out with just scissors. So especially if you're trying to cut something that is really fine or thin, like this one, right, for example here, it's got some fine details. I can use, especially my points on my scissors here, and I can cut all the way around and get a nice clean cut every time. Okay, so that's why I recommend you invest in some really good paper crafting scissors that have this point right down the end. So there are a couple of extra items that are not necessarily a must-have. They're more what I like to call a nice-to-have. One is grid paper. So this here is a grid paper, and you are going to be working on a flat surface, and you need a flat surface to work on. Now grid paper is actually going to protect your surface. So the one side's in inches here, and I'm going to rip this off for you. And then the other side right here is in centimeters. So depending on which you prefer to work with, you can have centimeters or inches. Once again, I prefer to work in inches. You can use as an alternative scrap paper like butcher's paper, just something to protect your work surface. I find for the value, and you get like 100 sheets or something of this, and it takes me a long time before I actually go through it and need a new one. And I do a lot of paper crafting, so that's saying something. And because this is all lined up, I can use this to line up my projects, like this for example, and I can then stick things down, making sure that it all sticks evenly and line things up. Especially when you're having to start drawing things. I can use my grid paper here and my lines as a guide to get those nice straight lines. It's also good for lining up our stamps for when we want to stamp and have our sentiments nice and straight. So once again, this is a nice to have. It's not necessarily a must have, but I do recommend that you do invest in some paper for your work service. Now there's one last thing that I do recommend, or a nice to have I should say, is this little tool here. It's called a bone folder. Now I use this often to crease my cardstock. I can score with this tool. I can do a whole lot of other little neat tricks with this little thing, and as we get going I will show you a couple of those little things. And you want a bone folder that's actually made from bone, like this one. You can get a lot of plastic ones on the market, but you definitely want one that is made from bone, as you're going to get a nice, smooth, crisp crease in your cardstock. Now you can also use your fingers when it comes to folding your cardstock, and you can go like this, or you can use your bone folder and get that nice crisp right there. Now I don't like using my fingers because I feel like it's people going right down the chalkboard, and that just really, I just can't cope with that, okay? So I do have a bone folder. Once again, it is a nice to have. It's not a must have. So your challenge until our next episode is to gather your supplies. So we're taking this slow, so we can explore all aspects of the card making process, and this will also allow you an opportunity to grow as a card maker. So our next episode, we're going to talk about stamps. We're going to talk about what types of stamps are out there on the market. How do we assemble our stamps? How do I decide what stamp to buy? There are so many out in the market, so how do I know which one I should be buying? And also, which stamp set should I pick out first? If this is my first stamp set I'm going to buy, how do I know which one I should purchase first? So we're going to talk about all that next time. So until then, thank you so much for joining me for this series, and I'll catch you in our next episode. Bye for now.